Hello out there, all you listeners of Wheelbite. Welcome to yet another episode number 4. First and foremost, thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Please always feel free to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all the various social media accounts at Wheelbite Podcast. And should you ever want to drop us a line, we are reachable at wheelbitepodcast@gmail.com. This week, we are discussing skateboarding's greatest and nerdiest documentary show, and that is Epically Latered, hosted by one Patrick Odell. Both of us are huge fans of the show and felt it was worth having a discussion about because with it jumping to cable at the end of last year, a lot changed. It became extremely popular among a group of people that don't necessarily skateboard. And we thought this was worth discussing and analyzing on a deeper level, as well as kind of trying to speculate who is worthy of being on Season 2 of Epically Latered for cable. So here it is, the Epically Latered episode. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome to San Francisco.
Don't skate here.
I feel like it's dangling by a fucking strain of bone marrow.
East Coast powerhouse.
It's New York. I stab you in the Russian floor.
Carter, it is fucking Friday the fucking 10th.
I'll give you $100 and I'll take out the Benny Hannes if you slide that 75-foot handrail.
I especially like the flip of the board.
Hey, yo, turn my headphones up.
Should I mic check it?
Yeah, go for it.
Hello.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Hello. Hello. Low.
Recording live from somewhere. What's up, y'all? This is another episode of Wheelbite coming live from San Francisco, California. I am host, one of two, Ted Theodore Mater. And today's topic, we are going to discuss motherfucking Epically Latered, the greatest, nerdiest thing to happen to skateboarding since the slap message board.
God,
Yeah, I'm saying it.
the deep depths of all the original skate trolls. The slap message
Yeah,
board.
before there was YouTube, there was just the slap
real.
message board. But naturally, this leads to Icebreaker being favorite Epically Latered episode. And as always, it's never easy for me to pick just one, but they're kind of tied into one another. And that's Mike Carroll and Guy Mariano. I think you learned so much about EMB and the way that whole culture kind of started and why they all bonded together. And then with Guy, you see a lot into the making of video days and how that all got started. And I like that they show a lot of stuff from in between, like the times where he wasn't skating. They had all sorts of weird footage of him kind of wiling out as a little kid. And I appreciate the fact that they were able to show so much of those two dudes' lives at that era.
Jay Green here. I approve of those two choices, definitely. Guys is dope because you get to see a lot of, like, all the other shit that happened in his career, too.
Yeah, that's why I like it.
But my favorite has to be the Josh Kalis one.
Oh, man, that one's so good, too.
Should we specify that, of course, we're not talking about the one season that has been on TV. If people don't know, there's a whole plethora of episodes that were a web series before it got to Viceland.
And that web series, like, it had spawned a major legacy already by the time it got to cable. So every skater was waiting for this moment, it felt like. You know, King of the Road getting on TV was one thing, but Epically Latered getting on TV was some whole other shit, because I honestly couldn't believe that, you know, a widespread public audience was even ready for that kind of skateboarding documentary show. You know, it's a lot like Behind the Music with skateboarding. And I guess people love those stories, but the difference
Exactly.
between Behind the Music and Epically Later, though, is like Behind the Music is always depressing. It's always like bands who just couldn't keep their shit together.
It's like the juicy articles I always wanted to read growing up, and like Thrasher and stuff that came to life, basically. Like, you got to know everything behind it. But anyways, favorite episode, Josh Kalis. It stands out because he's one of my all-time favorites, and he's been a favorite forever since I, was actually learning what skateboarding was and what cool skateboarding was and what style was. And I'd been a fan of his for so long, and to follow his career and then watch that episode and learn all this other stuff about just like how he's moved around and just like the little details of where he's lived and what those situations were like, some not so great, and just like his family life and that stuff too. It was a trip because, like I said, you follow someone so closely and you only see what's on the outside of it, which is what you see in the videos and the magazines, and then you learn all this other wild shit. You learn about the fucking relationships they have with like other skaters too.
Yeah, the whole light on him and Ricky Oyola's kind of beef with each other was really interesting.
Yeah.
I just felt like with that one too, they did a great job at really touching upon all the different points in his career. That was one of the few where they really nailed it in that sense. Like that and the Cardiel episode, they were great. He did
a very good beginning, not to end, but beginning to where he was at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because Kalis was still going strong at that point. And that's why Cardiel's story was a little different, because it did have sort of an ending. You knew it was going to get to this point where his career had to come to a close. In that sense, Pat O'Dell, the host and creator of the show, has always been a genius in that,
He definitely had the vision early.
Totally.
Because the shit has been out there. The content has been out there as long as skateboarders have been getting paid and been living fairly interesting lives.
And I think with someone like Pat O'Dell as the creator and host, because he himself is such a fan of skateboarding, you can hear it in the way that he talks, and you see it, the passion through his work that he did even before that. He loves skateboarding genuinely and wants to tell those stories. And that's what made him such a prolific photographer to begin with back in the day. He was definitely a photographer who told stories with his pictures. Obviously, the one that's coming to mind is this picture of Chet Childress at the Asbury Park pool. Do you know the picture I'm talking about? With the crane, or it's not a crane, it's like a steam shovel or something with the claw, right above this guy. And I think he's doing a backsmith. That photo is unbelievable. And Pat O'Dell could tell such good stories with his photography, and him taking his favorite skaters' stories to the documentary world. It wasn't necessarily creatively the hugest step for him, because he's still just weaving these intricate tales. But at the same time, it is the hugest creative step in the world for him, because he's now putting these skaters' lives on record for everyone to see in a very unique and profound, in-depth way.
And it's really resonating with a lot of people, and not just skaters.
I know, that's the best part. That's been the best part of it coming to cable, is all of a sudden you have all these people who don't care about skateboarding necessarily, but they're all enamored, and they're all coming to people like us, of course, and oh, what other episodes should I watch and stuff like that. We will happily inform you.
Yeah, I had some friends of mine, some young women in their, mid, late 20s, and they have not followed skateboarding. They couldn't tell you the first thing. and they're just come to me and they're just so interested and want to talk about Epically Latered and all these new episodes that they're seeing on TV. It's you kind of get the feeling as an older skateboarder, like, oh man, like you don't even know the half of it. Like, man, like this shit has been going on forever and it's fucking been the dopest shit ever, and the masses are catching on and taking over. Like some people would say a lot of that is happening in the skateboard world and industry.
Oh,
right
absolutely. That's been going on, you know. Skaters have always been trendsetters, but I don't necessarily look at Epically Latered as much of it being a trend as it is it's legitimizing skateboarding culture.
Yeah, totally. And he's done it very tastefully. Like you said, he's a big fan, and you wouldn't be able to put something together without just that like fandom of like diving deep into the world of skateboarding for probably your entire life to be able to like handpick the people and the topics that he's put together for all episodes.
I mean, he essentially said that in the beginning it was just him doing episodes about some of his friends. I mean, he was clearly very close with like the Baker and America teams very early on in his career. But after that, he was able to reel them in and be like, hey, I want you to do this episode. So he'd get friends like, you know, Jerry Sue and Spanky Long. They were his first subject matters. And, you know, he picked good people right off the bat. But it wasn't until he did Jason Dill that the show really kind of started to take form and become about people's story and their careers. You know, before that, it was just kind of weird one-offs. Actually, you know what the first episode is? It's Dustin Dolan getting hammered and going clothing shopping in New York City. And that's it. That's the whole episode. They like kind of talk about his career a bit and how much he likes to drink, and that's it. I feel like, though, with the first batches of episodes, though, you know, like we brought up the Behind the Music comparison and how that stuff was all like dark tales of Motley Crue doing coke and hating each other. But I mean, a lot of the ones he did back in the day, they didn't all necessarily have happy endings.
Like most, honestly, that I can like, actually, like most of my favorite ones don't necessarily have a happy ending.
Kalis had a happy ending. He was going to skate the new DGK park in Atlanta.
and he, I think it was like a little, you know, after he had gotten on to DGK, and him and Stevie were just hella hyped on each other, like being back on the same team. Yeah, absolutely. The Ali Balula episode is like super hard to watch.
Oh yeah.
Even like I had my girlfriend watch it with me, and that's like something that can appeal to anyone. That is very much a behind the music, like tragic rock and roll story, like that unfolds in real time, and it's something that we in the skateboarding world and industry is just kind of this elephant in the room of, I don't know, we don't need to go too far deep into that, but I think Patrick O'Dell did a great job using that story, and props to Ali for like letting that kind of be documented like that.
I feel like too, I mean, this episode wasn't necessarily a big downer episode, but the chocolate one, you know, that was, I think, the first time we really, as the skateboarding audience, got to hear the true story of what happened with Keenan Milton.
Right.
Like, you always kind of heard snippets and rumors from interviews and stuff, but no one really ever knew the full story until that episode, and they kind of divulged everything and just put it all out there.
Yeah, again, similar to like what I said about Kalis, like being such a big fan of the Girl Chocolate crew, like forever, and of Keenan Milton, and just this like weird like hearsay rumor shit throughout like the skate world, and not really knowing how all of that happened, and then to hear it like straight from them, it was just like it's really cool, but it's also just like bizarre a little bit too.
Well, the mystique is gone. And also at the same time, though, once again, that's like a very heavy topic, and it probably was difficult for either some of them to say it or some of them to watch it.
Absolutely.
But
for sure.
again, I think Odell did it very tastefully.
Right.
You know, he didn't overindulge anything, and he didn't like take any sides. There's no like bias in it or anything. And I don't know, he just handled such a very sensitive issue really well.
He's clearly trusted by the skateboard community and like these dudes who have by no means have perfect lives or have perfect stories. They've like really let him in. Another good example is the Antoine Dixon episode.
That was one I was gonna
which
bring
is
up, yeah.
is super gnarly. Again, like Antoine being such a huge fan of Antoine Dixon, and like he had a reputation already.
Oh yeah.
A big time reputation for being a loose cannon and dealing with substances and stuff like that. But like he caught a lot of shit in real time with that one. And I actually want to say that Antoine, I've heard, was not super pleased with how it came out or
I don't
how
think he was.
how it portrayed him. There's a handful of they're not scenes because this is happening and he's filming them in real life with like the cops and just like being wasted, and like it's really heavy shit.
I think that one is really hard to watch because of that. You know it's happening in real time. Like the Ali Boulala one and the talking about Keenan Milton, like those are things
Right,
that
yeah.
have happened and everyone has grieved with it and taken their time to move on in a healthy manner. Meanwhile, this whole Antoine Dixon thing, like this is his life as he's living
That
it
was
right now.
Yeah, that was his
You
current.
know?
That was his at the time. This was a while ago, but that was his current situation and dealing with like a lot of money that he was getting at the time, and just I don't like to call that a favorite episode just because of the way it is, but like that shit was interesting, and it definitely gave a firsthand look into what everyone really wanted to see from Antoine, which was him kind of live up to that rough reputation, which is kind of unfortunate actually. That like, I mean, I feel for him, honestly. Like I couldn't imagine being him and seeing that after and being like stoked on it.
No, not at all. And, you know, he went away not too long after.
Yeah.
He was incarcerated shortly after. I mean, that only makes things worse.
Not to be like a super downer with this, and but the Menace one, the Menace
Also
covered,
a very difficult one to
the
watch.
Menace covered a lot of shit, you know, Fabian and like just like that whole crew. I mean, that at the time he covered what had happened in the past again, so it's kind of a past tense thing, but
Fabian had been on the inside for a long
Fabian
time.
Alomar, yeah, did a lot of time and had a fairly prolific career in skateboarding before he went to jail.
And same with Stephen Callis. In fact, that's how the Harmony Corrine episode even came to be, is because of Stephen Callis, but more on that later. However, like Fabian Alomar talking, again, this just shows how fucking awesome Odell is and how vulnerable he can get his subjects, because like that Menace one is pretty long, but the Fabian Alomar part in of itself is like
It's
15
super
minutes.
gnarly,
Yeah, it's like just him telling his story.
Yeah.
His Crail Couch interview that he had was similar too, where he just like at one point kind of goes off and just like gives this whole lecture on living. And that's why it's so awesome to see him since then. Like he's gotten a little more spotlight and he's clearly cleaned himself up and is doing good in the world. And while his story was painful in the end, I guess technically there is a happy ending because he's living his life, he's acting, he's back on the board. It's really cool to see all that stuff.
It's not all doom and gloom
No.
in the skateboard world. Not all the time.
And no, it's not all doom and gloom, but all the ones that had endings planned out, like you saw where it was going to end. Like for me, the hardest one to watch in that sense was Ed Templeton, because like I've been a huge fan of him forever, and they've done great episodes on like that whole era of Toy Machine. For me though, the Templeton one was tough because I knew it kind of ends when like a few years ago he broke his leg, and he's pretty much been out of the game ever since. So we all knew that was coming, and within the episode he kind of reveals that like, yeah, I've retired from skating. Like I'll still do a curb once in a while, but you know, it shows that these people do, like, your heroes get older, and that's hard to see. But I think because skateboarding is treated differently than other sports, like
I would say, yeah, like the way you get older with skateboarding as a profession or even a hobby is completely different.
Like you don't see Larry Bird out there still like shooting baskets on TV or something like that. But like you still want to have the ability to see Ed Templeton pushing around and doing an impossible. But it's good that like, you know, Odell also knows what his audience wants. And like, you know, the fact that he did all those Toy Machine episodes too, he knows people want to hear and learn about Welcome to Hell and shit like that.
I really enjoyed a lot of that because I've never been, I know you're a super huge Toy Machine fan and Toy Machine guy, and I've just never, I actually learned a lot about the early Toy Machine days and just like Muska and BA and like how it all came together, and Josh Kalis. And it gave me definitely a different and new appreciation for the full picture and the full story of Toy Machine as they were emerging and into what, you know, they are today, and at the time those episodes were made.
Yeah. And I mean, I wish they had talked about that more in the BAM episode. And like now, like,
yeah,
I want to get into some things about like how they changed it for TV, but like if they had done the BAM episode the same way they would have done like the online web series, I'm sure that whole chunk of time where they were doing like jump off a building in the first CKY video would have had, you know, their own huge segment within the context of the episode. Same with the Muska episode and talking about shorties. Like, I feel like they focused way more on him ripping it up in Hollywood with all these fucking supermodels.
Well, I agree with that there, and that's the deep skate nerd coming out from you. But Muska that's what people wanted to see. That's what he was known for, the Tony Hawk era and just the crazy Hollywood dated Paris Hilton Muska.
I mean, yeah, that is the skate nerd within me, but there's so much to discuss about shorties and just that whole crew. And I feel like, you know, we were deprived of that as an audience because, I mean, don't you want to hear like bizarre fucking crazy stories from Smolik and Brandon Turner and shit like that? I'm sure like those dudes would be able to talk for days about.
Shout out to the Steve Olson Chrome Ball interview.
Yeah,
has a nice little window into that era. Some good stories.
I'm surprised they didn't get him on that episode either. Like
that would have been amazing.
See, that's the thing.
Steve
I feel like
Olson on TV talking about the Muska.
I feel like if we had had more shorty stories from those three dudes, I would have walked away very happy. But you know, obviously
I think they were the livest crew at that time. Muska, I can't even imagine how out of pocket Muska was at that time. I think the stories will never do it justice.
I mean, I did read one thing about like some Trans World Awards ceremony where the Shorties crew like rolled in late, like in the middle of the show, hella fucking faded, like in suits, fucking carrying the boombox, like blasting drum and bass music. And I was like, even if this article is making this up, which I don't think they were.
No
I was
way.
like, even if they are, I'm like, I just want to believe that this happened exactly
man.
the way they're describing
That lies one of the beauties of skateboarding.
it's just a wonderful thing to know that they were they were who they said they were. They were live as fuck, but they were exactly who they promised they were. But going into this season now, like we got 8 subjects for the first season on TV that I thought were all really good and really interesting, but I also feel like they really worked hard to pick people who would be universally known. Like anyone who doesn't skate could see that person's name on TV and be intrigued. I think the most underground people they picked were like Andy Roy and Heath Kirchart.
But not even.
But
Heath and I would say Reynolds probably.
Yeah, but Reynolds is just so well like kids who did skate or did play Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, they all remember Andrew Reynolds.
I mean, yeah, there's the Tony Hawk Pro Skater effect, of course, with Andrew Reynolds, and not to, of course, take anything away from him because he's the best ever.
He's the boss.
And he's the boss. But I think Andy Roy makes a lot of sense because
it does
he's
now.
all over King of the Road.
He's all over King of the Road, and he's all over Vice's
a couple
like
years
web
now.
series.
Yeah, he's got
But
some. Yeah,
But that's so recent. It's not like he like. I think of Bam Margera is the perfect example of someone like who anyone sees his name.
The channel itself, as far as like what people are viewing, he did it brilliantly because it's new. It's, most people who know about this show now only think that this is like the only content.
Right.
I think that Andy Roy made a lot of sense. I actually really liked the Andy Roy episode.
No, I did too. It was awesome.
Because it showed things in real time with Andy Roy. And if you know anything about Andy Roy, like that is, again, like we said about the Antoine episode and some other of those episodes, like that is what they show him being crazy on King of the Road on TV.
But he's really hyping it up for that show. Yeah.
He's hyped. No, that's actually how Andy Roy is. He might be like, it might be a little more choreographed, I should say, maybe. Mm-hmm. But he's fucking really screaming and hyped up and smashing his board and like screaming at skaters. That's really how he is. But again, they showed you with the little interaction at the Santa Cruz skate park, like that's what people wanted to see, I feel like, or that's what people who really kind of know Andy Roy and his past and some of the crazy shit that he's been known for wanted to see, and it happened in real time. And I thought that shit was kind of hard to watch at moments.
Well, I love that whole thing between him and the dude from Consolidated.
Yeah, that
was just amazing. But every time I see Andy Roy, yeah, he's definitely hyped up, but I don't feel like he is on King of the Road. He's much more approachable, it seems, than he is.
Yeah, totally. He's like fucking hosting the show. Right.
Yeah, of course he's like hamming it up a little bit, but I liked that episode a lot too because it touched upon some really crazy dark areas of his career.
Definitely not the happiest skateboard story.
No, but the ending was really good because he basically passes on his philosophy, which is like, yo, I'm here today and I'm happy that I'm here today, which is really important, especially right now with like everything happening in the world.
For sure.
I sometimes think people need to hear that. Also, if you ever want to see some ridiculous shit, because he does host all that weird shit on Vice, like there's one thing he did where he took some camera crew around and like showed him where he eats in San Francisco.
I've seen that.
And they go to Tommy's joint.
Yeah.
Dude, just watching all the comments roll in from all these people who don't know who the fuck he is. And they're just hating on him so hard. Like, I'm not going to let some tweaker tell me where to get good barbecue in Northern California. It's like, oh my God.
Don't play yourself. Tommy's Joint is the best.
First off, Tommy's Joint fucking rules.
Hell yeah.
You fuckers. And second, don't knock shit till you fucking do your homework, because like they're talking all this shit on Andy Roy, and if they just watch that episode of Epically Later, they know like, oh, this is like a really good guy. He just wants to skate and eat meat and not drink alcohol.
I thought the Bam episode was similar to the Andy Roy episode. They're both still skating, they both still rip, and they're both still around. Andy Roy probably more so than Bam. Bam very recently we've been seeing him on the board, but they had a similar feel in that it kind of, I guess they could have went deeper, like you said, into the Bam shit like earlier on in his career, but they kind of did like a full beginning to current, if you will.
Yeah. Well, I was glad they talked a lot about what was going on with him currently, because I think that's kind of been a big mystery for the past few years, especially since like he was super involved with being in mediocre rock and roll projects and not really skating, like dressing like a fucking weirdo and not skating. Well, his two favorite things to be doing.
Man, he's got such a crazy fucking story, dude. Like, of course, being affiliated with the Jackass, like, I'm not going to do a replay of his career or the episode or anything, but, like, it's really, we'll get into it, but that one is a very good example of why the older episodes that were longer or 4 parts were super, super dope to me. It should be noted that the original web series episodes had up to sometimes like 6-7 parts.
Yeah.
Right.
And they were all like 15 to 20 minutes long most of the time.
So he kind of had a little more to play with. Obviously, they're not being aired on TV in a time slot, but man, they could have, I felt like they could have went super deep into the Bam one.
You have so much history there with his time on Toy Machine, the fact that he dropped out of school to make all these CKY videos. He was part of the Love Park crew, and he was involved in Big Brother kind of early on. And, you know, he just had this crazy life throughout his career in skateboarding. And this is all before, like, the MTV stardom.
Made millions and millions of dollars on television.
Yeah.
Which he was like, he's basically, I would argue, the most household name.
Besides Tony Hawk.
Yeah, actually Tony Hawk more so, because Tony Hawk was very much just associated with skating. Bam was associated with Jackass more, I feel, at that time.
Oh, definitely.
Skateboarding.
Alyssa Steamer even says in the episode, like, she says it was Tony Hawk syndrome. People would say, "Oh, you skate? Do you know Bam Margera?" And like the same way they would say, "Oh, you skate? Do you know Tony Hawk?" It's the same deal. But Bam was different because, like, he was like a teen icon type situation, like almost like a boy band figure. Tony Hawk was, I don't want to.
He was just a skater.
Well, I don't want to compare him to someone like Michael Jordan.
Yeah, he's the Michael Jordan. Yeah,
but I
the
guess
face.
he is. He's the person you recognize with skateboarding, no matter what. The same way you recognize Michael Jordan with basketball. There's that like iconic picture of Michael Jordan doing the big dunk, hand fully extended, like, and like, I don't know if a photo of Tony Hawk, maybe him doing the loop,
the 900.
Or the 900, but I guess that would be his thing. There isn't like a
540s, basically.
Well, I was going to say, with Tony, there isn't like a 900 photo that fucking is unanimous with his name, the way that photo of Michael Jordan is unanimous with his name. But Tony Hawk, within representing skateboarding, is definitely on the same level of someone like Michael Jordan. I know it sounds cliche, but it's totally true. And it's funny to bring up Tony Hawk in that context, because one of the people who had his own episode was Spike Jonze, and Atiba had a great quote in that one where he said he would consider Spike to be skateboarding's biggest success story, on par with Tony Hawk. And I guess that's totally true, but in a completely different context.
I don't know.
You disagree with that?
I think it's valid because he was around from the beginning of his beginning, I should say, of, just being around skateboarding. And when I play the association thing, I don't associate Spike with skateboarding right away. And it's because probably the other parts of his success in the film industry have taken him further, I feel. But I kind of just like Tony Hawk to me is just like a skater, and he's just like a skate nerd, and he fucking loves skateboarding, and he always has, and that's kind of just where he's been at. And Spike is very much behind the scenes, and I mean he's totally valid, like, you know what I mean, he's earned his place in the skateboard world in history, absolutely. But for me, I don't know.
I agree with Atiba on this, though, because with Spike, his success was different. And you're right, he is more of a behind the scenes. I can understand why you would say, like, when you play the association game, it's not quite the same as it is with someone like Tony Hawk. Because, yeah, Tony Hawk is a skater. Every picture you see of him is him on the board. Well, maybe every picture you see back then of Spike is him sitting at a fucking editing bay and putting a video together. Because that is, like, there is a super famous picture of him in, like, the World Industries fucking offices, like, editing the video with Mike Ternasky.
What he was able to create is, I'm such a huge fan, don't get it twisted. What he was able to create, just the whole vibe and everything around the first, 4 Girl Chocolate videos.
Dude, even before that, though, with Video Days and Rubbish Heap, like, the reason I hold him to the same standard is because what Tony Hawk did for skateboarding, Spike did for skate videos.
I can agree with that.
The only reason Spike was like a true visionary in terms of skate videos for his time, because he took what had been used to make all the previous big videos before, but put his own twist on it to kind of tell more of a story and cause more feelings.
Big production.
Okay, look at the 80s. You have Stacy Peralta.
I should say more of a production.
I mean, that came later for sure. But, like, in the beginning, it's Stacy Peralta making Powell videos. There are these big production things, and, like, there's all these cuts, and it's a totally different thing. It reads more like a commercial, maybe, than, like, the videos we're accustomed to today. Fast forward to the late 80s, and you have H Street, and that puts the camera in the hands of just skaters, because now you have home video cameras, and you can take them out and go film whenever you want. You don't need to have this big production anymore. Spike kind of took both those ideas, like the DIY thing, but also like, oh, let's do something a little more concentrated with a little more personality and appeal to the masses. Like, that's why Video Days is so awesome, because yeah, the skating's great and the way he filmed it was kind of new age and revolutionary, but then there's also the whole thing of them like crashing the car at the end.
Super fucked up with a kid in the car.
Like, imagine seeing that in the early 90s, like before, nowadays that kind of shit exists all over YouTube, just like random bullshit that like you can't tell if it's artistically genius or just fuckery. And that was the fine line that Video Days was able to walk.
Yeah. And you got to, it's a good point. You got to watch that also evolve through his videos too.
Right.
And what level Spike was taking it to with his next video.
And that's what I'm saying, like, about the later becoming a big production. Like, Spike was this master of fucking, he had all these connections in Hollywood and knew how to pull them in a way that didn't seem overindulgent or like needy for attention. Until, of course, the fully flared intro. That was, like, the biggest, like, holy shit, who the fuck thought of this?
The skaters were sketched out.
Yeah.
Like, that's, like, they're going to do it for Spike, They're none of them are going to say no to this legendary moment. But, like, I like a couple of those stories when they're shooting that is pretty funny. We're kind of wavering here a little bit.
A little bit, but I want to come back to this idea, too, though, about the filmmaker episodes. What did you make of the Harmony Korine episode? Because it wasn't really about skateboarding at all.
Right. I appreciated the Harmony Korine episode. I didn't hate it. I didn't dislike it. I didn't think it was bad or not put together well. But they kind of told a story maybe that I knew mostly already, and it was mostly about kids, and it was mostly about like his relationships with like everyone and how it was formed. I mean, I liked it because I'm just such a huge fan of everything they're talking about in the episode. So I liked it. But as far as like what I'm geared up for and like ready for from Epically Latered, that maybe wasn't necessarily it.
That's sort of how I felt, because I knew they were going to talk about his film career, obviously, and kids, but I was like, man, how are they going to fill this time block up with stuff about skateboarding? And for the most part, it wasn't about skateboarding, but when I was kind of wishfully thinking that it would mostly cover that stuff, I figured we'd see so much shit from that early era of New York skateboarding, and the climax would be the fact that they did make kids, rather than that being like one of the first things they talk about. You know, I thought it would be gearing all the way through the episode to this culture and this idea, and the fact that they did go to all these raves all the time, and that they were always hanging out and living this fucking crazy
He talks about that.
Yeah, but it was more, that was a piece of the episode rather than what they were building
could have been, right? Yeah,
and that's what I thought it was going to be. So again, like, I did like it and I did learn a lot from it, but I was hoping for like a completely different end product.
I mean, I agree that, again, the most recent season has been geared to appeal to the masses, and using someone Spike's, both their stories, not to take anything away from them, both their stories are great and super interesting, especially to people like us. I can see how Harmony was like, all right, well, most people know the movie Kids and Spring Breakers. I
guess more people probably know Spring Breakers at this point.
At this point, that's probably true, which is fucked. But I do see I'm not going to call it a reach, but I do see the intention behind choosing a subject like Harmony Korine. And again, the story is super dope. But I guess coming from like the super skate nerd who we've had all these like super juicy episodes, that maybe was just like, I don't know, it was different.
Yeah, completely different kind of juice. But this gets to the point where you have to ask yourself, who is big enough to cover if they're going to do a second season? Are they going to pull some of the names that they used back in the day and redo those episodes? Because, like, look at someone like Brian Anderson. His episode that he had was full length. It was a 45-minute episode in total. They could air it on TV as is, maybe clean up some of the language. And there's a guy who, at this point, is super famous because of what he represents for gay culture in that community. And his coming out video that they put out a couple years ago was a huge success and a huge deal. It launched him into the international spotlight. But then also, at the same time, let's say they don't do that. Are they going to pick a whole new batch of people? And if they do, who are the people that are worthy to have episodes about them?
We've had a funny back and forth, me and Ted, about like trying to like create or crack the algorithm of like who's famous enough or like who's mainstream enough that it'll be interesting for the masses. Because again, let's be honest, it's on television now. It has to have a certain element of appealing to everyone or a lot of people.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a few. I think Ty Evans makes a lot of sense.
I mean, he had a very short one in the earlier online episodes, but because of where he is now,
so much has happened.
Yeah, they did that around the time Fully Flared came out.
Yeah.
And now I think like the fact that he's done TV commercials and these big 4K skate productions,
constantly progressing and like pushing the limits.
And he was featured in a lot of episodes in the first season. And by the way, if anyone has been paying attention to who was on the last season, do you realize how trans world feedback centric that whole lineup was? Between the fact you have Ty Evans in a ton of the episodes, and then you have Bam, Muska, Jason Dill, and Andrew Reynolds, 4 people who are in feedback, and the director of feedback in a ton of their episodes. It's just something.
The algorithm.
Yeah, the algorithm continues,
there
but
it
something dwells. Or
that's funny.
There's something there.
Yeah,
is what I'm getting at. But anyways, Ty Evans, he's done so much. in the past few years, and it would not surprise me if they did an episode about him. Like, he seems like a perfect candidate. He's not necessarily a household name, but because he has done all this interesting shit and done videos for like Mountain Dew and stuff like that, he seems worthy of having an episode. And it would be a story that people could probably identify with on a wider scale.
And now the new Bam Margera, if you will, Mr. Rob Dyrdek.
Yep.
He is an obvious candidate. I don't think it will ever happen just because he's such a crazy businessman now that, like, I think if he was going to do something like that, he would do it himself. And he's going to, like, make a fucking documentary out of it and try and, like, monetize it and capitalize on it or some shit.
That's the same reason why I don't think we'd get someone like Tony Hawk or Steve Caballero. Like, these are guys who are worthy of having a feature-length film made about them that's done by, like, a real super successful director like fucking Martin Scorsese or some fucking shit like that.
The thing about Dyrdek, though, is it would almost, I feel like, maybe not do it justice, because kind of like the Bam one, Dyrdek has this whole super interesting, we know bits and pieces of the history from back in San Diego and the Alien House and all this shit.
Yeah, living with Kelly Bird and Dwayne
Do you
Petrie.
think that if Dyrdek is covered in one of these episodes, like, they're going to be covering that, or they're going to be covering fucking Robin Big and Fantasy Factory Dyrdek and like DC Video transition into like crazy famous Rob Dyrdek? That's what I think they would.
They
cover
probably would
mostly.
focus on that. I mean, I'm not arguing that that's where the focus would be, but would they do an episode? I don't think it's like too beneath Dyrdek to do something like that.
No, not beneath. I don't think it's beneath, but he's completely transformed out of skater, seemingly in the public eye. He'll always be a skater, but to me, it's not very realistic for him to have something like that put out by someone else.
The other person who is questionable in my mind, and again, he's worthy of having something crazy done about him, but I also just don't think that's his style necessarily, but that's the Gons. Like, Odell has always said it's his dream to do a full-length episode on Mark Gonzalez. That's always been his thing.
You can't catch the Gons.
Yeah.
Like, how you gonna follow that guy around? Like, how you gonna fucking sit that guy down?
Gons is like the Mewtwo of skateboarding. He is impossible to fucking catch. But I think that he would sit down with Odell and would fucking do an episode. Like, I think that'd be awesome.
That's, I mean, all the real skate nerds out there are drooling over that one. I don't know. I just don't. Gons into a 45-minute episode, like,
Maybe they could do a two-parter for Armatsu or something like
it's almost
that.
like, you know, I understand the time constraint, but it seems like he's shifted the episodes to highlight one or two things. Does that make sense? Instead of, like, if the Gons did have an episode, instead of like chronicling his entire career up until now, like, I feel like they would maybe have to like pick a few things out.
Well, they'd probably talk about him being one of Vision's top dudes. They would talk about being the guy that started Blind, and then they'd probably talk about how he did Crooked.
And maybe how he's the skater.
Yeah.
He's your favorite skater's favorite skater.
They would definitely talk about his art, too. Like, they would definitely spend a good chunk of time discussing his fucking paintings.
Yeah.
You're right. They would definitely, I mean, I'd want to know about his time on Reel, because he did a lot of what I consider to be his best skating on Reel.
I guess maybe as like a fan, I would want to see more. I would want to see it rolled out with given it its propers.
I mean, he also could be worth a full-length documentary, but people who seem more like the skater that would be able to have a 45-minute episode, to me, like Jamie Thomas and Stevie Williams seem to fit that mold perfectly. A lot of people know who both those guys are. They've both done great things in skateboarding and overcome huge obstacles. Like, Stevie obviously was living the little ghetto kid life, his whole upbringing.
Dirty ghetto kid.
Yeah, sorry, the dirty ghetto kid life.
Stevie is a great. Well, I think Stevie is fucking perfect because we all have a decent idea of the rep he had in skateboarding and how it kind of took him like to get onto chocolate to really like bust out. But with what he's done with DGK, DGK is fucking everywhere, and the crazy contracts that he's gotten with Zoomies and all these just like huge brands, and how he's able to spread that. It started out as a small little like thing that like you see nowadays, like a skater owned board company that just popped up out of nowhere. And I think his success story in business and just how it all came up out of his struggle is a perfect episode. And DGK is enough of a household name. If you don't know who Stevie Williams is, you probably have seen DGK or a I Heart Hater shirt.
Yeah, exactly.
So
the Kool-Aid fucking shirt that he makes.
I think that Stevie's story is super dope, and I think that would be a great one.
And then even with Jamie Thomas, he has done the same thing. He's owned a lot of companies. He's won fucking championships. He may not also be a household name, but he also was in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, which sets him apart. He's just done so much, and again, came from very humble beginnings. Like, if you listen to his 9 Club episode at all, it's like 3 hours long. And he did mention in it that him and Pat O'Dell were talking about doing an episode, which is why, he's one of the more likely people that we have listed here who could have a full episode about them. And I hope he does. But then, there's the other question, too, in terms of who they're going to cover. They used to do pieces on younger skaters. There was a fucking Theodis Beasley one and a Sean Malto one, because Odell said for a while he liked the idea of checking in with younger skaters. However, I think that those episodes are kind of always a loss for his major fan base.
I hate to say it, but the Malto and the Theodis, I love both those skaters, amazing skaters, but it kind of seemed more like a day in the life.
It totally did. And that's one of the things I didn't like about those episodes. It reminded me a lot of his first handful where he was kind of trying to still figure out what the show was. And it's good that he wants to include the younger talent. But Malto's story to me was just I'm a nice kid from Kansas City who is really good at skating, and I came up in Kansas City, and then girl found me, and I wanted to be on Zero, but I couldn't quite make it. And now I'm sponsored by Gatorade.
I want to see some of the live Young Bucks, some of these dudes who are a little edgy and really get down out there. We have a Shad down here.
He'd be a good one.
I would love to see in a Shad one. Skater of the year, super young in his career, and he's still getting better and better.
And he's done a lot too. This is a guy who puts out 3 or 4 parts a year.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't think this show, the same thing with Deer Deck, I don't necessarily think this is something that's beneath him.
No.
I think, in fact, if anything, I think this would legitimize him just a little bit more.
I would love to see a Raven Terche one.
Again,
Raven's super buck.
And a person with so much history and ties to the skateboarding world.
Yeah. I think he would be a very entertaining. He was on King of the Road too, so he's had some screen time, so that might make a little more sense. But I definitely want to see some of the a GX. So one of the GX dudes would be super sick too.
Just that whole movement, I think.
Yeah,
if
he could do a GX episode, absolutely,
that would be really cool. Also, one of the younger people I was thinking that would be a good story for him to tell, because it was so quick and out of nowhere, would be someone like Chris Joslin. I don't really know Chris Joslin's background all that well, but here you have a guy who's essentially the Pat Duffy of his time, came out first part in a Plan B video out of nowhere.
Like a Jamie Foy maybe too.
I think Jamie Foy could, because I mean, dude, he
He's
had a
from-
hell of a year
He's
last
from
year.
bumfuck Florida. He like really kind of came up.
In the same year, he went pro and won Skater of the Year. But a shot out of all those people seems like the most likely, since also you got to throw into play here too. He is the first black Skater of the Year, which is ridiculous to even think about. That's such a minor issue in the grand scheme of skateboarding, but that
guess
is
you're
something I think worth discussing
Yeah,
in that format.
absolutely.
Because again, that's something, it's a pretty edgy topic, but I think Patrick O'Dell would be the kind of person who could handle that with class and tact. I mean, whoever they pick next season, I'm sure when they announce the lineup, all of us will collectively be like drooling, looking at our smartphones.
It's obviously going to have a few curveballs looking at the Harmony Korine and the Spike episodes. Which I'm looking forward to as well.
What, like more episodes like that cover that side of things?
I think it's cool that he can transform it a little bit and take something that is certainly involves skateboarding and is very relevant to us who, we love the originals and we love the new one, but it has to have that like kind of roots to it, I guess, the roots to the episode. So I think that it's cool how he can kind of spin it and take someone like Harmony Korine and Spike and kind of turn it a little bit. Like, look, this person isn't just a skater. Like, they don't necessarily skate, but they're very much involved and have their thumbprint on the industry and the culture and the history.
And I mean, if he's going to start to do that too with different art forms, I wonder too if we could get like a fucking Odd Future episode or something along those lines. Just stuff that comes from skate culture that doesn't necessarily have to do with skating. Regardless, he's tapped into a good formula. He's been doing this forever. And as long as Viceland keeps running episodes, I'll be happy. It's good to see that he's come this far and can bring that show to cable and that people like it and enjoy it, and it is reaching that wider audience, because if skateboarding is going to be in the Olympics, there's no reason you can't get other aspects of it on cable.
Definitely co-signed with just the type of exposure he's giving to the skateboard world and the skateboard industry. He's doing it in a very tasteful way, and it's nice to see something kind of out there on TV that's just 100% kind of gimmick free.
Mm-hmm. And obviously it's going to piss some people off, like that core audience. Like, I mean, you hear us bitching about like, oh, they didn't talk about shorties enough or something like that.
Right.
But like, obviously we, are nerds and crave that kind of information. But to the casual viewer, it's still great. And to the like core that he's going to lose, if I don't imagine that he lost too many people. I'm sure they were still excited to see this shit on cable. But, these things have to change if you want them to grow and do better. Obviously, he's got to change the time constraints and remove information that a regular person might see as boring. But this is so that he can go on and continue to do more successful things. So, hey, Odell, as long as you keep making episodes or documentaries about defunct skate magazines, I'm all fucking for it, man.